Welcome back, baseball fans. 1972-75 carryover league. Looking again tonight at the data for the draft coming up in March. Getting closer and closer. We're looking at tonight the second portion of waivered players. We looked through 32 of those a week ago. We'll look through another 32 tonight to see if somebody was put on waivers. That would be a very intriguing pickup for somebody. Most time, guys are put on waivers because they still have some baseball left in them, but it's not particularly very good. Occasionally, a guy gets put on waivers because the team just has too many guys, and they can only keep 4 of 8, and that 5th player can be very good sometimes. There's usually one star in the list somewhere. We may have uncovered it last week. We may uncover it tonight, or maybe even a few. Who knows? But we went through alphabetically by team from Arizona through the Dodgers. We saw a couple guys who were placed on waivers by each team. We've indicated with a number of 72 if the card exists. Of course, to be on waivers, you have to have a card in the first year, 72, so that we get exactly 64 cards in the waiver pool. Then we also will show any additional life for that player in the years 73 or 74 or 75. Actually, the further it goes, the less likely you'll find the player, and that year is vacated. And then after showing the years they participate, we then want to highlight what we think is a pretty intriguing year, take a little closer look, and see if this guy has a chance of getting a spot in the league. So let's just continue tonight. We left off with the Dodgers last week. So tonight we're going to begin with Las Vegas. Vegas put Ray Culp and Jim York on waivers. They both played for Las Vegas a year ago. So they just sort of ran out of gas in their careers. Ray Culp's got one more year left in 72. We didn't really highlight that year. Jim York has 3 years left, but none of these years are particularly worthwhile here. Culp's final year, 16 starts. He's got a 4.46 ERA and a 1.49 WHIP. He would just be a guy, as we like to say. Jim York, on the other hand, has 3 years left. Now, intriguing is that the ERA goes from 5.25, 4.42 down to 3.29. But what's also unusual, with a 3.29 ERA, he's got a 1.74 WHIP. This is a case of a low innings pitched card, so his ERA wasn't getting lit up, but he put a lot of guys on base in 38 1/3 innings, 48 hits and 19 walks. So I'm not sure if York was going to make it back into this league or not with those years. Let's continue. Let's look at Milwaukee. 2 players they had on the roster. Jim Fregosi, Gary Yestad. Yestad's just the utility player, has 1 more year left in 72, was with the Padres. Fregosi got sent to Milwaukee in a trade there, leaving the Angels, and would have gone to the Mets, I believe, but the Mets didn't really want him, so he ends up here in Milwaukee. He actually has 4 years of baseball in him, this Jim Fregosi. And we've noticed that 73, statistically, is his best offensive year. But what makes him intriguing is that he's got a lot of different defensive options here for Mr. Fregosi. He can play third, first, and short. And then at the end there, just third and first. He can't play short anymore. The big offensive year is 73. And that's a 268, 764 OPS season. And he's kind of a first base 320. He's a third base 327 and 72. I don't know. It could be a case where he fills in at a platoon somewhere. Probably doesn't get a starting gig. Most at-bats is 382 with a 232 average. So he sticks around baseball, but he's probably not a starter at this point. Next team up is the Twins. They had Kurt Blepfrey, and they acquired Jim Ray in a deal with Houston. Bleffery's got one more year left in 72. Is not particularly good. Jim Ray's got 3 years left. We like 72. Let's take a look at those guys. Yeah, Bleffery's a corner as a utility player. Normally has a nice on-base percentage. He takes a 196 batting average and turns it into a 320 on-base percentage, which is pretty commendable, but no power, though. This is 633 OPS. Jim Ray, the reliever, his ERA is over 4 in all 3 seasons, but in 72, he's got a low whip, putting guys on at a 1.33. So that's why we picked 72, highlighted that in case we need it. The Mets acquired Jim Nettles in a deal, put on waivers, and they have to put their own guy, Gary Gentry. Now this guy right here, the Mets had 8 guys that they wanted to keep. They traded for Rusty Staub to boot. So they ended up with, we'll just look right here, the Mets. Harrelson, McGraw, Seaver, and Rusty Staub. They said goodbye to Danny Frisella. They said goodbye to Cleon Jones. And Gary Gentry, they would have liked to have kept. He's got 2 decent years in 72 and 73. 73, he's got a 3.43 ERA and a 125 whip in 86 innings. And he could start in either season. I think Gentry gets in the league, I think. He's a decent starting pitcher. Again, right-handers, are not as high priority as lefties, but the stats are still pretty good. Jim Nettles, we've highlighted 74 for Jim. 710 OPS. 6 homers and 140 at-bats. That's not bad. And his defense is good. He's a 3 in center field even. So we like Jim Nettles that 1 year in 74. The Yankees, longtime Yankees, Jerry Kenney and Horace Clark are both running out of gas. They're running out of speed and they're running out of defense all at the same time. That's not a good combination. Jerry Kenney's got 1 more year left. He can't play the outfield anymore, just short and third, hitting .210, but a nice 304 on base. And Horace Clark has 2 years at second base, but he's only a 3.13 in year 1, a 4 in year 2, only hitting .241 and .263. Oakland letting go of Tom Haller, and they acquired Alan Gallagher in a deal. Haller has 1 year left. Gallagher's got a nice 73. Probably would have been with the Giants, I want to say. Gallagher's a 3.12 at third base in 72, but he only has a 5.88 OPS. But in 73, he can't field anymore, but he can hit. 273, 345, somehow a 299 slugging. Very rare to see a 345 on base and a 299 slugging. Doesn't even make much sense there. No home runs and 311 at-bats. That'll do it. Next, we have Sonny Jackson and Johnny Jeter. Sonny Jackson was a left-handed batter who could play some shortstop and some center field, neither particularly well. Johnny Jeter had a 320 season for one of these years, and then not much after that, and neither can crack the 240 batting average. At least Johnny Jeter gives you 2 defense in center field. But again, maybe the platoons. The other thing to check for these guys is, do they have a nice platoon? And if that's the case, then they can get in the league if they got some defense. The Phillies had Jerry Johnson and Joe Horner on their team a year ago in the bullpen that went to the League Championship Series. They had to say goodbye to Joe Horner's 1.97 ERA. He has 1 more year left in 72. But the ERA balloons to 4.40 with a 1.51 whip. And even worse is Jerry Johnson. 3 years of Jerry Johnson, but his ERA his whip is 1.5, 1.8, 1.5. Just putting too many men on base. So good choices, I would say, of these teams, knowing to put these guys on waivers instead of being keepers. So I'll give them credit for that. Again, we've actually moved waivered players into the retirement list because we had too many waivered players. Let's go now to the last 16, beginning with the Pirates. Ted Kubiak, utility infielder, can play all 4 years. That's nice. Bob Robertson had a great 1971, gets a World Series ring for those Pirates. 72 and 3, kind of middling, but 74 seems to be statistically good. Let's take a look at the Pirates. So Kubiak's an intriguing infielder. What's interesting, we didn't highlight any year because it's all about the same, but the fact that he's in here for 4 years, I'm thinking Kubiak does get picked up as a switch-hitting utility infielder who can play second, third, and short, and it's often a 3 at all 3 positions. Of course, his OPS doesn't get above 580, so that might hinder him. But still, a very utilitarian player with 4 options. The more years he plays, better chance he gets picked up. Bob Robertson struggled in 72 and 73, but in 74 the power came back. The batting average didn't. He hit 229, but give him a 320 on base and give him a 479 slugging with 16 homers in 236 at-bats for Bob Robertson. And he's a 2E14, folks. He's going to be in the league. You know, maybe not for the, obviously not for the Pirates, but on waivers, they are going to have, they have Al Oliver playing some first base. They're going to eventually have Stargell playing some first base. Pirates could bring him back, but I think Bob Robertson will be sought out. Defense and power at first. Usually gets picked up. Next up, we got Portland. They had Ken Boswell and Fred Stanley as their double play combination a year ago. They put them both on waivers, yet all 4 years are available for both players. So that's a wide spread. Nothing been highlighted. In the case of Boswell, he often can't hit lefties very well, but usually it's righties. In these particular 4 years for Boswell, though, nothing looks particularly good. 658 OPS is the high. Fred Stanley, it's worse. We got a 576 and a 212 batting average is the best of 4 years. Ouch. Stanley will bring you a 3E16 shortstop and a 3E14 shortstop defensively, which is nice. Boswell just doesn't have defense either, but he's got a left-handed bat. If we can get him with some power, a left-handed hitting second baseman with power has some value. He could get in with that. Nothing special, though. Moving on to the Padres, Chris Cannizzaro and Ed Spezio. Spezio had a lot of power versus lefties a year ago. He's down to just 2 home runs and 270 at-bats now, the 580 OPS. Cannizzaro, we like a 72. 0-arm catcher. 641 OPS. Nice on base, nice amount of walks. Takes a 240 average to a 340 on base, which is pretty cool. That might get him in, as his arm's not terrible. A platoon catcher, possibly. Seattle, they had Jim LaFay and Ron Woods a year ago. LaFay had a career with the Dodgers. Ron Woods had a career with the Expos. LaFay only has 1 year left. Ron Woods is a good 72 and 2 other years. Let's take a look at those. LaFay can still play second and third, but his bat's dwindling. Ron Woods has a nice 1972. 10 homers and 220 at-bats, 258 average, 321, 425, 746. And he's a 2 with a -2 arm in right field. I think that guy gets in the league. Ron Woods. Good corner outfielder, at least in the platoon. Maybe not an everyday player, but a very nice 72. Defensively, he's good through all 4 years, though his bat starts to fade. But pick up that year here, and it's at least a platoon role, if not an everyday role. Now we go to the Giants. Bill Parsons and Rich Reese both played for the Giants a year ago. They just decided to let them go to waivers. They both play a couple more years. The first of the two is better for both. In the case of Parsons, he actually, this is a quality starter right here. He is a 30 starts. He's got 214 innings pitched. He's got 391 ERA, but he's got a 122 whip. Dude, Bill Parsons. Finding a guy who could pitch on 3 days rest, and there's a guy just sitting there on waivers. So, you know, there's going to be teams who are going to take a guy just because he pitches on 3 days rest. And we got a freebie right in the middle of the draft. You can just, he'll be the first, probably the first pitcher selected off of waivers because he pitched over 200 innings for that reason alone. And again, the whip's pretty good. It's 122. So Bill Parsons, if you're wondering, was a Brewer. Got traded to the Giants. This is a long, complicated deal. So a couple years ago, the Giants had Gaylord Perry. They traded him to Cleveland for Sam McDowell. And then they weren't happy with Sam McDowell either. They sent him to the Brewers for Bill Parsons. Parsons had one good year, but they put him on waivers because the Giants are pitching rich. They've got a lot of good guys coming through their system, like Jim Barr and Mike Caldwell and Charlie Williams. And of course, eventually they'll have all these great left relievers coming up, like Gary LaBelle, Randy Moffett, and so forth. Rich Reese, I see he's got a 218 year and then a 144 year. So he's probably should have been put on retirement. We had enough guys on retirement though. Cardinals, I think they had Bob Berta as their DH, and they swapped him out for Mincher to put him on waivers along with their pitcher Al Santorini. Each has 1 year left, and that would be in 72, the waiver year. Mincher, he's pretty much done. 148, 448 OPS. Santorini, though, 30 games, 19 starts, 133 and 2/3 innings, a 136 whip, 4.11 ERA. That could get into the league as a number 3 or 4 starter, but obviously, there'll be a pecking order on this waiver list, and it would appear that Parsons would get picked probably first. Santorini would be on that list somewhere in the middle, I'm guessing, as a capable reliever, capable spot starter relief. Got a couple more teams to do on the waiver list, beginning with the Rangers. Luke Walker, who's really bounced around this league, was a Pirate, was Seattle, now he's with Texas. Bill Gogolewski. Let's go check out. Let's start with Luke Walker as a lefty. Talented lefties always stick around the league. 72, Walker, we highlighted that year. It's a 3.40 ERA. Whip's a little bit high, 142. But we probably aren't going to be concerned as long as he can get lefties out. He pitched 92 and 2/3 innings. I'm thinking he'll definitely be in the league. It's just a question of if a team wants him just to be a situational lefty, or they actually want him to be a starter and face lefties and righties. The first year highlighted is his best. Gogolewski, his first year 72 is highlighted with a 128 whip in 150 innings. So the big concern of pitching on 3 days rest, something that Parsons can do. You see these other guys just don't get that many. 150 innings. We saw 133 innings. That's nice, but you're still in no man's land. You have an equal chance of getting to the league as a guy with 50 or 60 innings. If you can't pitch on 3 days rest, you can't pitch on 3 days rest, and you're not as desirable. So Gogolewski and Al Santorini sort of fit the same mold there. And lastly, and sadly almost, we go to Toronto as, well, first we'll do that Halanier has a couple years left as a utility infielder. He was a Giant, I think a Yankee as well. Now he could get into the league because he can play second, third, and short, but he doesn't have on base with a bad batting average nor any power, and his OPS is below 500 both years. So if he's got an opportunistic split on one side, the utility of him, second, third, and short might get him in. But sadly, we have to finally say goodbye to Joe Grisenda as a courtesy because he has a card in 72. We gave him waivers instead of retiring him. He was Toronto's representative in the All-Star game. I think 3 of the 4 years we used his 1971 card. And he was Toronto's best player. Was actually a Washington Senator in 71. Don't have his stats here anymore because that, year is gone. But for the Senators in 71, I think he had like a 180 ERA. He's a left-handed reliever, and Toronto made him the closer. Really helped them make a surprise playoff appearance a year ago. But with 1 year left in 72, at age 35, He's got 30 appearances in relief. He's got a 5.66 ERA and a 1.80 WHIP. And it just seems it's just over for Resenda. We'll look at the card eventually during the draft. If he can get some lefties out, he might get considered. Again, you're going to have guys, pitchers with an ERA over 5 who throw left-handed. A couple of these guys will get into the league because they throw with their left arm and they can get lefties out, even though their ERA is above 5. That could work. In the case of Resenda, he might be bad versus lefties and righties, and therefore, not worth the trouble. So that is the look at the waiver guys in 2 parts, which leads us with the retired guys. We can do these next week in one batch because a retired guy obviously doesn't exist, but he can come out of retirement. Sometimes the guy gets sent down to the minors and comes back later in the timeline. And so we want to look at the retired guys. We will take a close look and see if there's any young player who had to go back down to the minors and come up a few years later, see if they can get into the league. And we'll look at retired players next week. So thanks for checking this out, and we'll see you next time.